Okay, so this is our lesson for week 10. Since so few people were able to come to class, I'm just going to do it by the video. What I want to start out by doing is just reviewing our story sequence model. This is a sample of a template, and I will, after I'm done here, I'm going to upload this so that you'll have it to make your outline with, because what I'm going to do today is more practice with this story sequence model, but you're not going to write it. You are going to write it from a source, but your source is going to be, remember last week, what you had was your retelling of a story when you're borrowed a conflict. And what I'm going to do this week is something similar. You're not, but what you're going to retell is a famous story from the Bible that teaches a moral lesson. I want something that we would learn something, a good lesson from. So I want you to retell a Bible story to me from this one. So just remember this first section that you have to have right here is your characters and your setting. So you will know, you'll pick a Bible story, but then ask yourself these questions. Who's in the story? What are they like? When does it happen? Where do they live or where they go? Then ask yourself, what is their problem or their conflict? What do they need? What do they want? What do they think or say or do? What's the climax and resolution? How's the problem resolved? What happens after? What is the message or the lesson? And I really, this week want it to have a lesson. So that's just a reminder of what the model looks like. And like I said, I'll give you that template so that you can make your outline from it. I just want to check the style for you guys for this week because I've forgotten something. Yes, I am going to add one stylistic technique. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to review everything we know so far. We have, if you remember, 3 categories of stylistic techniques. You have dress-ups, which you know most of those, right? You have who-which clauses. You have ly words, you have strong verbs, and then you have adverbial clauses. Remember, the easiest way to do an adverbial clause is to use a because clause. And then you have sentence openers. And your sentence openers, you know so far, the number 1, the number 3, and I'm going to add 1 this week. So I'm going to go ahead now and share this screen just so that we can have it. So for review, let me get bigger print. Okay, so we have dress-ups. And remember the job of dress-ups? Vivid picture in the reader's mind. Have a strong image or feeling associated with them. So we have an ly adverb. We have the strong verb. We have the quality adjective. We have a who-which clause. Not a tutu, but a WW. And an adverbial clause. Just a reminder, an adverbial clause can be any one of these words. But the easiest usually for people is the because. And then you have your sentence openers. Your first one is a number 1, which is the first thing in your sentence is the subject of the sentence. Find your verb and who's doing it, that's your subject. And we also know a number 3 sentence opener, which is an ly adverb. That's the first position in your sentence. Make sure that you're not marking your sentences that are number 3 openers, counting that ly as your opener and your ly dress up. And ly dress up is not the first place in the sentence. And an ly opener must be the first word, okay? So every paragraph should have 2 ly words in it, one that's an opener and one that's a dress up. And then today we're going to learn the number 6 opener, which is also known as the very short sentence, or VSS. Don't mark it a VSS, mark it with the number that it is. It's just abbreviated VSS, very short sentence. And we define a very short sentence. You have to know what that is. What's very short? It means between 2 and 5 words, okay? And one of those words must be a verb, because if you don't have a verb, you don't have a complete sentence, okay? Now, there are things called fragments, interjections, and depending on what we're writing, sometimes those are okay to put in, but don't count them as a very short sentence. So a very short sentence might be something like, I was freezing, okay? The reason why these are considered stylish and not kind of babyish, the very short ones, is because eventually we're going to have a total of 6 different ways to open a sentence. And so that will make our sentences a whole bunch of different lengths. So we'll have some that begin with a subject. It might just be the subject and the verb and maybe some adjectives and stuff. We have an ly adverb, so we've added a word onto the beginning, and then we might have some stuff. We're going to have different kinds where we're adding clauses to sentences. So we're having different ways of starting the sentences, which make the sentences longer. So if you've got this wide variety of things going on, differing lengths and all that, and all of a sudden you have, I was freezing. Well, that's like, ba-boom. It gives it some punch when it's in the middle of several long ones. So that's why it can be very stylish to use a very short sentence, or a VSS. And that's the opener that we're going to learn. So today, remember, what you're going to do is you're going to complete a story sequence model from a Bible story. So think of, we're going to brainstorm a little bit, what are some Bible stories that tell a moral lesson that you might want to choose? I have, let's see, maybe the story of Queen Esther. There's a lesson to be learned there. Daniel, I have a class doing Daniel in the Lion's Den. And there's a moral lesson there. Trying to think. Jesus told parables that taught moral lessons. So maybe you'll retell one of Jesus's parables. You've got the Good Samaritan. Got the prodigal son. You've got the story of the seeds and the different soils. You've got all kinds of stories. Maybe another one is the widow. The story of the widow's mite, if you remember that one. A mite is it's not an insect, it's a measurement of money, but there's a story in the Bible about the widow's mite. You might have, there's a lot of stories from Daniel, but trying to think of other stories from the Bible that you might tell. What about the story of Jonah? You might tell that one. If you're really brave, you could tell the story of Job. Old Testament, there's lots of stories. Noah. Maybe the story of the Passover. So you would pick one that you know fairly well, that you're comfortable with. And then you're going to ask yourself questions to fill that in. So let's say I'm going to take the story of the fiery furnace, okay? So characters and setting. Who's in that story? Well, we know we've got Daniel. No, yeah. No, we don't have Daniel in that. We have his friends, Shadrach. I'm going to spell these wrong. Meshach and Abednego. What do I know about them? I know that they were exiled to Babylon, and they were Hebrews. What else? They followed God. Faithfully, even in the time of Babylon, right? There was actually a time where they requested let's just call it kosher for lack of a better term, approved foods for Jewish people. And they were very healthy. So they had, let's just say they followed God faithfully. And the thing I know about them is that the king was actually impressed with them, with their integrity. Okay. Where are they? What's our setting? It's in Babylon. Very ungodly culture. Lots of false gods. Okay. So there is our setting. What's the king's name? Nebuchadnezzar. I'm guessing his name spelling. We'll have to look that up if I was there. Nebuchadnezzar. Still spelled wrong. Well, we'll see. Maybe it's impossible to spell that name right, or my computer doesn't know how to spell it. So that he's the king, and he's arrogant, isn't he? So, but he does respect these three. So what is the problem then that they have? The problem, the conflict, and the plot. The problem is that Nebuchadnezzar constructs a big statue. And then he tells people to bow down to the statue. And so that's a problem for the Hebrews. Can't, because why? They are Jewish. And the law says, you shall have no gods before me. So they can't worship him. And so they are respectful. But they refuse to bow down. That's a problem, isn't it? They refuse to bow down. So what happens is Nebuchadnezzar is furious, and he says to throw them into the furnace. Well, first he asks them why, doesn't he? Don't you know you'll be thrown into the furnace? And they say, we know, they understand, but they say, even if, right? Actually, what they said first was, isn't it? They said, God will save us. But then that's the other thing they say at the end. That's right. They say, even if he doesn't. I'm going to put an X here for won't. Even if he doesn't, we won't bow down to the statue. Because they're going to honor God, even if it means they die. And then we have our third thing, our climax and our resolution. The climax happens when they get thrown into the furnace. And it's super hot, right? The guards who are taking them up die. When they peek in, they see 4 people in the fire. And so that's kind of exciting. They see 4 people in the fire. So when they open the furnace up, all 3 come out. And they don't even smell like smoke. And so the king says, your God is the God. Let's do this. Is Lord. That's what he says. He honors them. And so he no longer requires them to bow down. So then our moral lesson is to trust God. Bow to no one. Okay? So you see there, what I did is I took an existing story and I'm going to retell it like that. Now, I recommend you use a different story. Okay? If you want to be extra creative, what you can do is, like we did with the borrowing a story, you can choose a Bible story and retell it using different characters and see if we can tell what Bible story it's based on. If you think back to the VeggieTales videos, I don't know if they still have those around, but if you think back to those stories, there were things that were retelling this type of creative way, the story of some of those. In fact, they did a Daniel, or the fiery furnace story on Rakshak and Benny, if you remember that one. So you can try to do it like that. And then as you read your stories, we'll try to guess which Bible story it's based on. Or you can choose a Bible story maybe that you think is not super well known, but that has a great lesson attached to it. You could do it that way. But the thing to be important is we're wanting you to really follow this structural model, okay? And make sure that you have all the stylistic techniques, including that new number 6 sentence opener. Very short sentence with 2 to 5 words. All right. That is the writing lesson. I hope everybody has a great week, and I look forward to hearing from you and reading these stories.